Just after dawn on a Sunday, November 1988, Interstate 44 near Springfield, Missouri. Jack McMullen, a Missouri state trooper, notices a van going a bit above the speed limit. Usually not the sort of thing that gets a highway cop's motor running, but this is the late 80s. The cocaine industry, fueled by the recent emergence of crack, is blowing up. And this area, this stretch of highway, is a prime transport route for couriers moving weight between West Coast importers and East Coast drug dealers. McMullen knows the signs. He's not new to this. Driver with a California license, van registered in East St. Louis, that warrants a search. And the search turns up, under a mattress, 1,100 pounds of coke, all in bricks stamped with a scorpion, the logo of Colombia's powerful and notorious Cali cartel. The drugs are going to lead back to Los Angeles and a couple of heavyweights. One, a Colombian expat known for his connection to the cartel, and another, a high-level Crip gang member and a notorious coke broker. But we'll get to them in a bit. This is the second largest seizure of cocaine ever in the US at that point. And what's interesting is not just where it's coming from, but where it's going, its destination. And that destination is Washington, D.C. The dealers in D.C., even the biggest ones, are not usually getting that pure Colombian stuff direct to them. Usually it's coming stepped on from Miami or New York in much smaller shipments. This is different though, and it doesn't bode well for D.C. In 1988, the city is fast becoming America's murder capital, not just its official capital. It's the height of a crack epidemic that's also a murder epidemic, as gangs wage war for control of crucial blocks, and an unprepared and overwhelmed police force can do little to stop it. That cocaine, too, is headed specifically for one man, a man who police estimate controls 30% of DC's cocaine and crack trade, but who himself would later tell an interviewer that he had controlled 60% of it, of the entire city. A man who many in DC see as the guy who brought crack to their city, or at least ushered in the crack era, who became so notorious that even 30 years later, his name still rings out in the streets. When he goes down, which isn't much later than this van bust, the entire country will be fascinated by the trial of the drug lord dubbed the $300 million man by 60 Minutes, who had 150 dealers working for him and whose crew was suspected of at least 30 murders. Throughout the course of his dealing career, he'll do business with both the Cali cartel and the Medellin cartel, including the sons of the infamous Griselda Blanco, cocaine queenpin of Miami. Law enforcement, scared that something violent might happen during his trial, elect to keep him and his crew detained at the Quantico military prison, 40 miles away in Virginia, instead of DC jails, and fly them to and from the court every day in helicopters. That man is Rayful Edmond III. And the crazy thing is, he's only 23 years old at the time of that bust in Missouri, and only 24 when he's brought to trial the following year in a case that became perhaps the most symbolic of the crack era. Edmond is nothing if not a business savant. An assistant U.S. attorney once said of him, quote, "He could remember deals, transactions, to the penny. Just think of what he could have done legitimately." And the craziest thing about Rayful Edmond, he's going to become an even bigger dealer after he's locked up in a maximum security prison. And then, one of the FBI's most notorious snitches. This is the Underworld Podcast. Welcome back to the Underworld Podcast, a show that dives into the murky world of international organized crime, brought to you by two journalists who have reported on this stuff all over the globe. Myself, Danny Gold, and my colleague, Sean Williams, who is in New Zealand. Every week, we trade off hosting duties and bring you a story about, Russian mafias, cartels, drug lords, fun things like that. And as always, bonus episodes and interviews are up at patreon.com/underworldpodcast. You can sign up on Spotify or iTunes for the low price of $5 a month. Email us tips at theunderworldpodcast@gmail.com. Shout out to Alex Epperly, who actually emailed about this episode, and the good guys at Theorist Podcast Studios, who are letting us use their facilities today. Underworldpod.com for merch, the usual blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, the blah, blah, blah. I'm gonna keep seeding this, but if anyone wants us to do something together live in New York, I'm gonna be there in November. I'm just gonna keep pushing this until Danny finally relents, because it's gonna be my 40th birthday, man. So you kind of owe me. I think you got to do it. So just spam us if you want us to do a
saddest
live
40th
show.
birthday I've ever heard.
I just wonder if anyone's interested in this. By the way, I realized this morning. This is how a story gets made in my world. By the way, this is like I'm in the middle of a story, and this is what that looks like. It's like a million different index cards with a load of shit on them. And that is why I currently feel like a psychopath every day. But anyway, yeah, over to the show.
Oh, yeah, hold on. I got, dude, I have a friend and associate of the show, I think, who I mentioned before, who got himself into some trouble. You know, had the Fed, someone I've warned constantly to stop posting, got himself into a situation, kept posting, and then I sent him a photo because I found the old t-shirt that we sell for merch right here. You know?
It's such a cool t-shirt, man.
It's a great t-shirt. Go buy those. But I sent him a picture and was like, dude, how many times do I have to tell you? And then he ordered one. So hopefully he's going to slow down with the posting. But yeah, just don't post, guys. It's not, if you're living that kind of life, it's not worth it. But yeah, let's get into it, man. September 5th, 1989. George H.W. Bush, famously, the same year he took office, I think in his first emergency address directly to the country from the Oval Office, gave a press conference on crack. Quote, "This is the first time since taking the oath of office that I felt an issue was so important, so threatening that it warranted talking directly with you, the American people. This is crack cocaine." He held up like a little piece of crack. "Seized a few days ago by drug enforcement agents in a park just across the street from the White House." As the camera kind of zooms in to show the crack. "It's as innocent looking as candy, but it's turning our cities into battle zones." And I think not as cool as the interview Hunter Biden just gave, where he talks about how to make crack. I don't know if anyone saw that, but it's good advice. But I think a lot of attention was paid to how bad and bloody the crack era and sort of crack wars were in cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Miami. Even though Miami, I guess, was more cocaine wars. But Washington, D.C. around like 1988 was, I think, one of the most, if not the most violent cities in America. And it got so bad that you had congressmen, senators, even the president giving statements about how dire the situation was, like blocks from the White House. And especially with it as the nation's capital, it kind of was this symbol of how bad drug violence had gotten. It was just like a gnarly city at the time. I mean, famously, its mayor smoked crack, Marion Barry, and he got caught by FBI surveillance smoking crack in a hotel room after an ex-girlfriend set him up. And he famously uttered the line, "Bitch set me up," right when he got caught, which, you know, fair. Like she did. She set him up. Still though, I think the Toronto mayor, right? Rob Ford.
Oh,
he was like smoking crack in the Peas with like Somalian gang members. I think Bloods. Like that was. I mean, that was, and there's videos of it, and he zooted out, man. But that was a good one.
Yeah, R.I.P. Rob Ford. I think he died like 10 years ago, but we should actually do a show on him. That was crazy, man, when that came out. Also,
he was
maybe
legend,
the largest man with a crack addiction in human history.
They loved him, man. He was up there, like he was familiar.
Yeah,
you know, like it wasn't his first time when they had that video, and he was just like riffing like one of your friends, man. It was
maybe we need to get Hunter Biden on the show. Why not?
I mean, he gives a good interview, you know?
He really
does.
But
yeah, DC, this is the height of any crack era depiction you've ever had in your head. It's being torn apart by the drug violence, the corruption, and a complete breakdown of public trust. By 1988, the city's homicide rate reaches 369 murders, and it keeps climbing, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a city of only 600,000 people. In 1990, it has the highest per capita murder rate in America. And in 1991, Washington hits its bloody peak with 479 homicides. It's a war zone. Police are going to later admit that they basically lost complete control of certain neighborhoods, like a lot of neighborhoods. Says a Washington Post crime reporter from Los Angeles who moved to DC and later wrote a book about being a crack addict while covering the crack epidemic in DC. Quote, "The drug dealers here on S Street did not seem to care at all about anybody watching them. Whereas in Los Angeles, the drug markets where I made my purchases were controlled by Central American gangsters, and they at least bothered to look over their shoulders to see if there were any LAPD black and whites nearby."
Yes, good gonzo. I mean, journalists addicted to drugs while reporting on drugs is a fine tradition, not just from me. It's like, I don't know. I had a friend who was, an acquaintance, let's say, who was addicted to smack while reporting on the City of London back in the day. And there's a bunch of other guys in the UK, like Will Self, Bunny Hoskins, John Crace. I don't know. Maybe there's something to it. I got these index cards to turn into something legible. Maybe I need to get doing something different.
I think a lot depends on how you classify the word addict. You know?
Yeah.
In that regard, just saying.
Well, you can. It's a one-off. You can do one-offs with heroin, right? It's easy.
Sure. You know, if current members of the Washington Post were crack addicts, it would explain a whole lot.
Well done.
But Dale, give me the but after that. That's some good lounge lizard humor right there. Seriously though, I mean, I've talked about like the reporting that I've done on the ground in Kensington, North Philadelphia, in places like North St. Louis. But I think it's really hard to grasp for people. Myself too, even though I was alive at the time, but those under 30, like how devastating the crack era really was in these neighborhoods, not just like the addicts, but the violence that came with it. Here's a DC police officer, again, speaking to the Washington Post, quote, "We had cases where guys would shoot somebody, ambulance would come pick them up. They'd follow the ambulance, and if the guy was still alive, they run up to the ambulance and they start shooting the guy on the stretcher."
Jesus Christ, that's like, Haiti levels of violence. That's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, there was a sense of lawlessness. And a lot of people attribute all of this in DC, or at least point to one man as the guy who brought on the onslaught of that crack epidemic in their city. And that's Rayful Edmond, who was actually locked up pretty much for good by the time before he even turned 25, just to show you how quick his reign was. But Rayful Edmond III is born in DC on November 26, 1964.
That means two other sets of parents called their kid Rayful.
I kind of like the name, you know?
Rayful. Ray the Fool? Rayful. Yeah, I don't know.
He grows up in Northeast DC in a pretty middle-class home. Like his mom, Bootsy, she works for the government in the Department of Health and Human Services. His dad is a government employee as well. She had told Diane Sawyer she was making $40K a year, which I mean, in the mid-70s in DC, it's not bad, right? But both his parents also allegedly deal drugs on the side, which we'll get into in a minute. He's got 6 siblings, and he grows up in a house with lots of relatives, uncles, aunts, cousins, grandparents, like a multi-generational home. Crowded. He's the baby brother of the family, and he's spoiled by his parents. He grows up going to church, playing basketball at the local courts, normal things like that. His mom, though, she flips diet pills on the side, which I assume are like prescription amphetamines, right?
Yeah.
And his dad allegedly had ties to some heroin dealers and might have sold some blow. From a young age, he watches his parents bag up the stuff, he watches them make money, and he's soon carrying cash for his mom and collecting money for his dad at age 9. Start your kids young at what you want them to do, like apprenticing, like a guild. Like that's the move. That's how they learn. He also grows up in a neighborhood where drug dealers are ever present and they're getting money. In the 70s, it's a lot of heroin. In the 80s, the early 80s especially, you're seeing a lot of cocaine. And there's a lot of money to be made. And the people that are making the money, they're not shy about flashing it. Still, he's a popular kid in school. He's talented. He does well, gets good grades. Teachers like him. They say he was sharp and motivated and good at math, which is a little foreshadowing right there. He's also like a seriously good ball player. He wins most popular and best dressed in high school, just like a young Sean Williams did at whatever Hogwarts-ass school that he went to.
Nice. Do you want to know which year my school was founded?
I don't know, 1276. Who knows?
Well, you got the last bit right. It's 1576.
I mean, a couple hundred years off, but I figured it was something like that.
And it was founded by a guy named Death, but he changed his name to Daith, which is I don't know what to make of that, but it's all right.
All right, sounds good. You're wearing your glasses from your that era too.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna have a lot of new listeners this episode, but I wearing sunglasses indoors. I know, guys, but there's bright lights. I got to read off a screen. It looks funny. I know people get really mad about it, but there's more important things to focus your energy on.
Yeah, don't look at this spot that I got, which is making me not shave as well. But just focus on something else in the background.
Yeah. So anyway, despite the early skill set development, he ends up going to college for a bit. I think 1 semester at the University of DC. He gets a job as a cook before he becomes the chef and does actually get left up north. But anyway, the money is not coming in. He's seeing all this fast money getting made around him, and he decides he actually needs to get into games seriously. We're talking like early to mid 80s, I think here, maybe like 82, 83. Hannah McKinney, who wrote a chapter about Edmond in an academic book or a white paper, I couldn't tell which, says Edmond's dad provided his first kilo to start selling. Another source I saw says a local kingpin named Corneli Jones takes Edmond under his wing and starts teaching him the ins and outs. And Edmond is a prodigy of sorts. He gets his own strip in the neighborhood, starts expanding. He gets kids to serve as lookouts. He starts employing some family members and all that, and he's making money. By the start of the mid-'80s, 84, 85, he's one of the biggest dealers in the city at only 19 years old. He's setting up shifts for his workers. They're doing like 3 a days, 8 hours per week. He's got a photographic memory for numbers, for business, insanely detailed, a great leader, smart. And there's this amateur documentary about him. And one street dude tells the camera that he was a superstar already, just coming out of the 12th grade.
It's actually refreshing in this day and age to hear about a guy who's mandating a sort of like 8-hour workday. It's good. I like it.
He provided benefits too,
yeah,
which we'll get to. The real deal guys treat stuff like a corporation, and they make money.
Yeah, man.
They also murder a lot of people, but still.
Well, don't they all, Danny?
Yeah. But in around 1985, 1986, everything changes, because that's when Rayful Edmond III discovers crack. And that's going to change the game. It's impossible to verify this, and we've talked about it before, like the origins of crack and who brought it where, right? There's the story of the Dominicans in Washington Heights inventing it. There's also a story about crack first being cooked in the Bahamas and the sort of vicious Jamaican posses who emerged in the late 70s and 80s, bringing it to the U.S. and spreading it all across the country, which the second part is definitely true, and we'll talk about that more in a bit. But all that is to say that there is a lot of lore. And the lore for Rayful Edmond is that he's the person who brought crack to D.C. and popularized it. We do know at the very least, he's going to go on to develop the largest crack dealing organization in Washington, D.C. in the 80s, maybe ever. He monopolizes the drug trade in a way that no one else had ever seen. And he starts raking in the dough. But the big change, the thing that's really going to change the game for him, happens one night in 1987 in Las Vegas. April 6th, 1987 to be precise. That's the night of the marvelous Marvin Hagler versus Sugar Ray Robinson fight at Caesar's Palace, predicted to be the fight of the year.
It was an amazing fight. That, oh my God, I love Marvin Hagler. He's just like kept coming forward. He's like Margarito. Speaking of boxing, I'm actually reading The Fight by Norman Mailer, which I don't know, just wanted to read for research. It's pretty incredible stuff, although he just like kind of walks around Kinshasa wondering if he hates all black people, which is not a vibe that would probably get you published these days. I just listened to a chapter where he spends about 10 minutes.
A top podcast, though.
Yeah, he would have been.
Yeah, you're the number one influencer.
I just listened to a chapter where he just basically talks about pooing his pants because he doesn't like toilets. That's a whole chapter. I mean, the 60s, man. It's just amazing. 70s? I don't know. It's just a better time.
So anyway, that's the night that he meets... That's the night that Rayful Edmonds meets Melvin Butler. And Melvin is a Crip in Los Angeles. He's high-ranking, and he's also got connections. The kind of connections that go right to the Cali cartel in Colombia. I mean, we've done an episode on Cali, but for those who don't know, go back and listen to that episode. It's really good. But they were Pablo Escobar's main competition, more powerful at times, bigger, and they controlled a significant amount of all the cocaine in the world. So Butler, his connection is through another young drug lord in Los Angeles, a guy by the name of Bo Bennett. Bennett had stumbled on the good fortune of being friendly with a Colombian who moved to LA and represented the Cali cartel's interest there. Or if not, he was well connected enough to the higher ups. There's lots of names here, but follow me, it'll be over quick. Bennett befriends this Colombian, a guy by the name of Mario Villabona, whose contact in Cali goes by Oscar. So you have Melvin Butler connected to Bennett, who works with a Colombian in Los Angeles named Villabona, who takes orders from Cali cartel higher up called Oscar. Here's Time magazine in 1990 breaking it down, and this is fascinating, honestly. Quote, Bennett's good fortune began when Oscar instructed Villabona to develop a market for crack in ghetto areas. It was a bold but necessary business decision. By the mid-1980s, the price of powder cocaine had fallen, in part because sales to affluent whites had peaked. Crack, the tiny smokable rock, could be immensely profitable if it could be moved in huge quantities. Blacks were a tempting new market. Villabona somehow selected Bennett to become the Cali Group's first connection with black street gangs in the U.S. With Villabona, he swiftly built an empire that by 1988 was moving 1 ton of cocaine a week and pulling in gross income of up to $4 million a month. And this team in L.A., it puts crack on the map in South Central and Los Angeles, according to that Time article in Law Enforcement, which is just kind of wild. Like, I never knew that before.
Yeah, I'm guessing like $4 million a month almost 40 years ago, what? 5-6 times that now, at least. It's probably more, right?
Yeah, I think that's just starting. I mean, they were raking in hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Nuts.
For the short time period that it lasts. And this is right around the time the Florida smuggling routes are getting pounded by the feds. So Mexico to Southern California is becoming a much, much bigger market. LA was becoming what the feds called the new Miami, and they estimated that 5,000 Colombians working for Cali and Medellin had moved there, which to my ear sounds gotta be exaggerated, right? But they were definitely present in numbers, and they were looking to connect with high-ranking members of the Bloods and Crips to set up distribution. So back to this fateful night in Las Vegas. Edmond used to fly out to Vegas all the time. Big time boxing matches always drew an audience of like mafiosos and big time drug dealers, gambling, all that. And he meets Melvin Butler either at the fight or later that night at a nightclub in the Hilton Hotel. My assumption is they each kind of recognize who the other is or what they do. And they agree to meet up the next day to play some ball at a local YMCA. And it's there that they talk shop and strike up a deal. Ray's asking him for a couple small shipments, maybe 5 keys to see what's going on. They have no contact for 2 months. And remember, even though Butler is like a big time Crip, he's just a broker, right? He doesn't have the direct connections. Rayful calls him back to check up on whether he could pull it off. He says he's not quite ready, but he tells him to come out to a party in Cali. Whatever happens there, it must have worked out with Bennett, because by January 1988, there are big trips happening with 200 kilo shipments moving to D.C. Interestingly, Edmond never even meets Villabona, the Colombian connect in LA. Everything is through Butler, though I think he does come out to LA and party with Bennett, I believe.
Yeah, that's pretty much how we started this podcast, wasn't it? You just asked me to play some ball, and then we kind of took it from there. So like just to kind of rewind it a bit, the Bloods and the Crips are dishing the stuff. They're like the guys dishing the stuff out on the streets, and then the Cali cartel are getting it out of Colombia, and it's the cartel who are sort of like placing their guys in the States to get it from the jungle to the streets, right? Or are there any other kind of middlemen playing that game?
I assume there's other middlemen. I mean, if it's going through LA, it's going through Mexico already, but I assume there are other middlemen whose job it is just to get it over the border. But I mean, I didn't realize it was such a, I knew they worked with some of these gangs. I didn't realize it was such a concentrated effort. And it could be Time Magazine being hyperbolic. I don't put that past them. But it is kind of fascinating how they were able to connect to the street gangs right there. And of course, there's every drug dealer a rapper names himself after or shouts out, whether it's BMF or Rick Ross, the real Freeway Rick Ross. They all had these connections somewhat. Yeah, but this just seems like the beginning, like a start of it.
It's interesting.
And the thing to understand about DC, right? It was at this weird part of the distribution chain, right? It was never a destination for top quality stuff. I mean, the local dealers did not have the straight from Colombia connection. They would go to New York or Miami and just kind of scavenge together a couple of kilos at a time. So Rayful setting up this stuff that's directly connected, it's unheard of, right? When they're finally busted, the bricks that were heading to Rayful from LA, they're going to test at like 93% purity. And Edmond stuff that he sells on the street, where it's usually 20 to 30% pure after, being cut and chopped up, it's going to come back higher than 50%, which is unheard of and might explain why he dominates the market. Edmond at one point is buying a quarter of all the coke Villabona is bringing in. He's paying $17,500 a key. Villabona would get it from Cali for $9 to $10 a key, and he would sell it at only a 5% markup to Bennett, who then sells it for as low as $13 to some people, which is wild. And I mean, very nice of Villabona, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
With the price that he was paying, Edmond, after cutting it, he's making $70K cash on it. And that is a lot of money. He's getting massive shipments every 2 or 3 weeks, and he's sending back couriers with millions constantly to LA. Edmond also, he didn't work on consignment, right? He just paid these guys in advance always. He trusted Bennett, he trusted Butler. He'd go to LA, he'd party with Bennett and Butler, they'd go on like big shopping sprees on Rodeo Drive, and those guys would come to DC and party with Edmond there, and everyone would just go to Georgetown and like spend $60,000 on all the boutiques there. The shipments, which I mentioned are as large as 200 keys, they're driven across the country in rented vans or trucks, and they're usually moving vans or trucks, right? So as not to arouse suspicion. They have license plates that are out of state, and they actually change vehicles in every state. Sometimes there's smaller shipments of up to 20 keys that people just kind of flew with, like in luggage. Remember, there's no metal detectors then, I think, right? No metal detectors back then. So it was very easy to move stuff if you were smart about it over airplanes. Here's the Washington Post describing Edmonds' operation. Quote, operating near the Strip from a house on M Street owned by his grandmother, Edmond, 24, is alleged to have presided over a local processing and marketing system that involved a virtual army of workers in his retail operation. He also allegedly dealt with dozens of other smaller dealers in his wholesale cocaine business. From the time the drugs were delivered to Edmond from suppliers on the West Coast, they were moved to at least 4 separate locations before being turned over to the street sellers, who could make up to $7,000 a week, hawking the plastic bags at an expanding number of open-air city drug markets, according to court affidavits. The cocaine had to be cut, packaged, stored, and then distributed by lieutenants, responsible for collecting the cash and supervising the street sellers.
So I don't know much about crack, although, fun fact, it was technically the first Class A drug I ever took in my life.
That is a fun fact.
Kind of story, yeah. I think I was 15 or 16. It was really, really weird evening. Anyway, are there big problems with ODs on crack, or is it like the opioid situation now, or is it more the associated crime like you mentioned up the show?
I mean, people OD'd and their heart stopped and things like that, but it wasn't like fentanyl, in terms of like the massive amounts of ODs. And I think a big part of it too was like the people themselves, like the dealers fighting over territory for sure. And then also the people themselves getting very desperate and like frantic and stuff like that. Whereas, fentanyl is a downer. People not out as opposed to, I think like Sean, if you were going to fight a crackhead or someone on fentanyl, I think you'd rather choose the person on fentanyl.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
That's why you went around the Kensington, right? Where you just try to beat everyone up. Just an ego trip.
For my new YouTube channel where I just go stream just the worst things that you
Again,
anyway,
many followers.
Yeah, we'd probably be 10 times bigger than this if that was actually what we did. Rayful Edmond is making money hand over fist, right? He's treating his employees right too. He's sending them on all expenses paid trips to the Super Bowl, boxing matches, legal coverage, benefits. And if you thought he was a presence in the neighborhood before, a star, now it's even crazier. And yes, Sean, they do call him a Robin Hood. Quote, yet back in Edmond's home neighborhoods, many residents saw the drug boss as a Robin Hood-esque figure. He passed out free turkeys on holidays, sponsored youth sport teams, and randomly tossed cash to crowds, burnishing his image as both self-indulgent but also invested in his community. Quote, writes a blog called The Ghost of D.C.
Wow, what a line. I mean, a couple of turkeys in a Little League sponsor is pretty small potatoes to get the Robin Hood status. There's other people building entire cities that we've covered on this, but I don't know, man.
I mean, he would go, in the hood in a limousine, passing $100 bills out to the neighborhood kids whenever he saw them and stuff like that. But, he had the limo, the Benzes, the Porsches, the Jaguars, the custom silk suits, the diamonds, the Rolex, all that sort of stuff. And cruising around in like the back of a limo is pretty sick. Kind of like that old Chappelle Show sketch.
I'll take your word for it.
A bit. But a later segment about him on 60 Minutes begins, quote, walk down any street in Northeast Washington and people will tell you here he was the reigning king. He was a man to be admired and imitated. On the other side of that, here's a quote from an old-timer reminiscing about him in a 2019 article from the Washington Post. Quote, he'd come on the street and throw little bags of drugs in the air and everyone, all the crackheads, would scramble and pick them up. When I walked outside, I walked in the middle of the road because all the sidewalks were so crowded with drug dealers and crackheads. And here's the Washingtonian describing some stuff depicted in a book by Tony Lewis, who worked alongside Rayful Edmond but kind of did his own thing, but he was a top dealer too. Tony Lewis Jr.'s father was a top associate of Edmond. He writes in his excellent autobiography, Slug, that he once saw Edmond win $10,000 at craps and throw it in the air so people in the neighborhood could pick up whatever they could. In D.C., Lewis writes, kids knew more about Rayful than they did about Martin Luther King Jr. He'd make sure neighbors had turkeys on Thanksgiving. He bought meals for the homeless, cars for his top staff, and clothes for his friends. He sponsored a basketball team in the police athletic league called Clean Sweep, the name of the police operation designed to get drug dealers off the streets. He owns dozens of cars, 6 properties, a bicycle shop, a clothing store. I mean, who explains this stuff to these kids, right? Like even setting up an LLC and doing the taxes for this podcast is super annoying.
Yeah, but was he tax compliant? That's what I want to know.
They didn't get him on tax fraud, so maybe he was.
He was.
The go-to. There's also an infamous story of Rayful having a run-in with legendary college basketball coach John Thompson, who was Rayful was always at the courtside at the Georgetown Hoyas games, which must have been like the Patrick Ewing era, I think. It was definitely way before Iverson. What happens is Thompson's coaching the Summer Olympics in Seoul, And then he gets back, and law enforcement officials inform him that some of his players are being seen around town with Edmond. Thompson puts word out on the street that he wants to talk with Edmond. Thompson had also lectured his players to avoid drug dealers or places where they hung out, like a particular club where there had been a shooting. And his son, who was on the team, tells him, you might as well tell them not to go to church or the boys club because the drug dealers are everywhere. That's how insane the crack era was. Oh, okay, wait. So the main player hanging out with him is Alonzo Mourning. So post-Ewing.
Even
Thompson
I know him.
has this meeting. What's that?
Even I know him, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he was great. Hornets, dude. Sick team.
Yeah.
Thompson had this meeting with Edmond, and the story goes that he told him to stop hanging out with his players, that there would be consequences if he didn't. Edmond backs off and later says that Thompson was a cool guy. And Thompson wrote about it in his memoir. I think it only came out like 5 years ago. Says that he was respectful and just asked him to make sure his players weren't caught up in anything illegal.
That's a pretty boss move. Also, I feel like half these scenes are ripped straight from The Wire. I mean, The Wire ripped them straight from this, right? I can just see that.
I mean, Baltimore,
sure
but yeah, similar vibe. But yeah, this is all shortly after the Len Bias incident, which, he was a top draft pick in the NBA in 1986, and he OD'd on cocaine. I think he was freebasing 2 days after being drafted by the Celtics and died, which is a wild story and sort of, was a giant national scandal, especially during this heightened sort of drug epidemic situation. But like the sort of nightmare that you heard of someone doing something once and like ODing was that. But I think he had congenital heart problems that he didn't know about. Surely. But I probably should have looked that up. So the Thompson one too, I mean, that's a national news story as well after a Nightline piece airs on the meeting. And Thompson admits to meeting with Rayful and gets some flack for it. And he says in response, quote, I don't understand this expression of amazement. We cannot close ourselves off from the whole of society. Anybody who experienced the Len Bias situation knows we cannot isolate ourselves, seal ourselves off from people. We better start confronting these problems. We better understand we're incorporated with these problems. This isn't them or they. The people involved with the drugs and being killed are our children. It's not like somebody crawled out from some hole who is so different from us. So
nice. Good work.
It is a great speech, and it kind of gives you a good feel for how crazy the crack kingpin era really was for DC, for Edmond. I mean, he is the man in DC, which is not supposed to stand for Dodge City. But it does, because even though Rayful is controlling 30% of the trade in the city by some accounts, 60% according to him later, like I said, there's others who want that territory. Guys, you know how hard it is to concentrate these days. I talk about this all the time. We have to go through so many articles, so many documentaries, all that to take notes. I think like 45 articles for this one. And it's really hard to keep your focus and stay concentrated. And that's where Magic Mind comes in. I mean, I've talked about it before. They'd reached out to us, sent us a whole lot of their product. There were 3 different versions. There's the Max, which has a lot of super amounts of caffeine to really keep you going when you're tired. There's the Free, which has no caffeine for like a little late day pick me up. And there's my favorite, which is the Original, which has like the perfect amount, sort of like, like the Goldilocks version. And the stuff just hits right, man. Like I have it in the morning. It complements the coffee that I have, and I can focus. I can concentrate. Like it legitimately actually works. I know our audio producer Dale, when he used to sit through hours and hours of me and Sean just messing stuff off left and right, he takes it as well, and he's able to stay focused and all that. I've been taking the Original shot all month, and it really like you have calm energy. You're not jittery. It's not like taking Adderall or anything like that, or energy drinks or other supplements where you're wired and you can't actually get anything done. So now, as they're launching, right, they have a limited offer too for all 3 of the formulations, 60% off on your subscription, which is insane. The offer will not be around for long. I'd really grab it now. I can't recommend it enough if you actually have a lot of stuff to do and want to get stuff done. That's magicmind.com/underworldmf, or use the code underworld60 for 60% off. They also have a 100% money back guarantee. If you don't like it, they refund you 100%. No questions asked, which basically means you're trying it for free, and you can cancel the subscription anytime. magicmind.com/underworldmf, or use the code underworld60 for 60% off. And there's an interesting New York Times Magazine story from 1989 that really goes into the crack wars, that theorizes why it was so violent, that it wasn't just the money. It talks about how, unlike heroin, there was no organized crime really in crack. It was easy for anyone to get involved, no top-down structure, quote, with no overall hierarchy or command structure to impose order. Turf wars broke out over the most lucrative spots. Dealers regularly ripped off customers and stole from one another, leading to frequent shootouts, stabbings, and executions. Crack started a new breed of urban guerrilla, members of a fierce, proliferating army that left the police badly outnumbered and outgunned. The article, like the main... Are you drinking wine right now, dude?
No, I'm drinking Diet Coke.
It's like
I was going to say
it's
not like fucking stout at 8 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah. The article, like that New York Times Magazine article, is actually about how the Jamaican posses moved it out of New York and then Miami into all over the U.S., which I guess is the other competing side of the Bloods Crips stories from L.A. And I'll let them take it from here. Quote, soon, however, the drug began to move out from these gateway cities and into the heartland. It would travel via a fearsome new set of traffickers, illegal immigrants from Jamaica, who would quickly and radically transform the way crack was distributed around the country. Now, we've gone into detail about this in our Jamaican posse episodes. I think it was a two-parter, one of our best.
Yeah, great.
Must have been years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago. But it's definitely worth a listen if that's something that you're interested in. The first episode is about the explosion of violence in Jamaica in the 70s, gangs backed by political parties, and how some of those gangsters fled to the US, New York, Miami, and got heavily involved in the cocaine and then crack trade. And in DC, crack was going for 3 to 4 times the prices as New York. So those posses wise up and they start branching out from Miami and New York, setting up shop wherever, including DC, and either clashing with the local heavyweights or just completely taking things over or clashing with each other.
Yeah, this does kind of sound, it sounds similar to the stuff you said about Kensington now. Is that also fought over by a small crews, the kind of fentanyl crisis, or is there a big top-down kind of Godfather situation?
I think there's a top-down situation with the cartels. I don't remember exactly what, we toured it with a cop who works at Vice there. It's in the episode where we talk about Kensington, but I don't remember exactly. I mean, obviously people are going to fight. It's drug dealers, not the most responsible people selling fentanyl. But I think for the most part, it's top down and they're more interested in making money at this point. And also, it's harder to get away, I think, with that. But I mean, there are lots of shootouts in Philly. Did you see that one of so yeah, I mean, the honest answer is I don't know for sure. But I think it's definitely more top down and definitely less violent than the crack era. Definitely less violent than when the Jamaicans set up shop. Throughout its run in the mid to late 80s, Edmonds' crew is going to be suspected of being involved in at least 30 murders. I saw one source mention they beefed with the Jamaicans, and the Washington Post was talking about it in 1987, how the Jamaican posses were trying to take over in D.C. So it would make sense that Edmond and his crew went to war with them. And here's that Post quote. A quarter gram of crack that sells for $10 in New York brings $25 here. Police say the posses control the crack market here and are trying to take over the district's active cocaine market. No one knows what share of the market Jamaicans control, but it is the struggle for the cocaine market that has led to numerous shootings and an increasing number of homicides, police say. And here's an article from a few years later breaking down one of the wars the Rayful Edmond crew fought. Trinidad's a neighbor to here, it's not the country. Quote, during the summer and fall of 1988, the guns got more use as rivals tried to invade Edmonds' territory and other dealers balked at paying for cocaine supplies. Early June 13th, 2 of Edmonds' trusted lieutenants, Leslie Wheeler and Anthony Thomas, were killed in separate incidents on Orleans and Morden Places northeast. 3 days later, Ricky Rayleigh, another of Edmonds' lieutenants, was gunned down as he sat in a car in the 600 block of I Street northeast. Within a week, Brandon Terrell, leader of the rival Trinidad drug gang, was slain outside the Chapter 2 nightclub, allegedly on Edmonds' order, sparking a gang war that has not subsided, even with the arrest of Edmond and more than 24 of his associates. And Edmond has bigger problems than just street wars. The feds are on him like clockwork. That van bust from the cold open happens in the fall of '88, and it's a big piece of the unraveling, though they've already been on him for something close to a year before that. And while he isn't connected right away to the van, it doesn't take long. Cops soon discover that the driver is a suspected courier for Bennett, the LA heavyweight, and also is suspected of delivering to Edmond. The van has a car phone and they go through it and see, phone calls to Bennett in Villabona, the Colombian. There's no encryption in those days like that. I don't think there is, right? Probably not. They get a wiretap up and they use that wiretap to make a multi-million-dollar bust in Detroit of one of Villabona's lieutenants. And a few days later, literally weeks, I think, since that car bust, Villabona is arrested in Malibu. Bennett's busted soon after. This is in November of 1988. Edmonds' main supply chain is being completely dismantled.
This is a pretty random question, but because it's not a state, right, DC? So what's the situation? Does law enforcement work differently there with the feds and local cops and stuff?
I think there was talk during this period of, obviously there's no state police. I think there was talk during this period of the feds taking over DC policing because they have a city police force. But
right.
Things had gotten so bad that on the Hill, politicians were bringing up a sort of federal takeover of DC.
Okay. Yeah, I can imagine that. It's pretty weird that DC, I don't know, I don't get how it kind of works, but yeah, it's pretty random.
So yeah, at this time, the other guy in that triumvirate that was not busted, Butler, he's the Crip, he can keep the supply going a little bit, but not enough, and he gets busted soon enough. Edmonds' wholesale business suffers. Other dealers start going elsewhere. He knows his time is soon going to be up, and he starts consolidating, right, selling things off. There's other busts happening, people giving him up. A 48-year-old well-to-do white woman who he had been linked to, maybe even dated, and who he supplied for her own business, she gets arrested, and she wears a wire on him and his family. And his mother's caught on that wire admitting her son deals drugs. In December, his brother-in-law gets caught in D.C., meaning a courier with 19 kilos. Edmond, at this point, like, he knows the doors are closing on him. He's selling off his real estate and expensive furniture. There's a big bust in L.A. People start talking as well. He's even informed of a secret indictment about to come down on him. The DEA wants to catch him hands-on, but, I mean, he's kind of too smart for that. They're unable to do so in a timely enough fashion. And on April 15th, 1989, Rayful Edmond III and 30 members of his crew are arrested, including, I think, like 10 members of his family. Trial is an absolute madhouse, one of the defining ones of the crack kingpin era. It's a gigantic media sensation, national headlines. Police think the Edmond crew is so dangerous, there's a chance they're going to try to jailbreak him. So they move him and his top associates 40 minutes away to the Quantico Marine Base jail. They're flown to court every day by helicopter. Jurors' identities are kept hidden, the first anonymous jury in Washington, D.C. history, and they're kept behind bulletproof glass. An informant whose name is accidentally released, he's shot in the leg. Another witness has their home firebombed. Some reports say a 17-year-old witness is killed, but I feel like that would have popped up more if it was true, so I can't verify that. The trial lasts 56 days. Notably, some friends and employees testify against Edmond, and he makes some pretty incredible arguments that are the kind of arguments you make if you were smoking crack, not selling it. Here's the Washington Post again, quote, Edmond's main arguments for his innocence were twofold. First, he maintained that since he did not sell to children, he was not doing anything illegal. Those who were old enough, he said, could make their own decisions and buying drugs was their own choice. Second, he declared that he was never caught directly selling drugs, so officials could not pin anything on him.
Clever.
Which, I mean, caught a libertarian bent, but I don't think it's gonna work in the 80s. 100 witnesses take the stand. He gets convicted and receives 4 life sentences. His mom gets 24 years. His brother gets 21, all the way down the line. So the thing is, you know, Rayful is seen as the man, a powerful influence, a real deal hustler, Tony Montana type figure. But much like Tony, his reign is short, right? The LA pipeline only lasts like 18 months. The whole organization was around for maybe 4, 5, 6 years. His career and life are over at 24. You know, you want to be Sosa and not Tony, as a wise man once said. But Rayful's career, is it over? Sean?
Yeah, sure. Sounds over.
No, it's not over. Stop jumping to conclusions. He's actually about to move more weight than he ever did while on the outside.
Oh, good. Okay, we got a third act because my mortgage is piling up. So can we get some more ads in?
Yeah, we need those watch outs. Edmond gets locked up in USP Lewisburg, which is a maximum security prison, where at first he's held in isolation because of his notoriety, with the trial being huge news and everything like that. But when he gets out, he starts hustling in prison. First, small time, right? He's having visitors and other inmates smuggling drugs and balloons in their mouths, probably in other orifices, coke, heroin, the usual. It's all well and good, right? But there's power moves to be made. And Rayful Edmond is a natural. He's a savant. The thing is, there's other notorious drug lord type prisoners in Lewisburg at that time, like big time guys, accomplished, well connected. And 2 of them are Osvaldo Trujillo Blanco, nicknamed Chicky, and his brother Dixon Trujillo Blanco. Who are they? You might be asking. You might recognize the last name, right? They are the sons and lieutenants of the infamous queenpin in Miami during the city's cocaine cowboys era, Griselda Blanco, who, if you don't know, she's not only the namesake of the best rappers to come out of Buffalo, but she dominated the cocaine trade in South Florida in the 80s. You know, she was one of like Escobar's top operators in the US. And she was known for not only moving an insane amount of weight, but also being brutally violent. I think she pioneered the motorcycle drive-by with an Uzi and left a trail of dozens, if not hundreds of murders between Miami and Colombia. We actually did an episode on her a year back, I think, right when the Netflix series about her life starring Sofia Vergara came out.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I haven't seen it yet, but I remember thinking back then, how could they possibly make a sympathetic character out of her? Because she seemed, from the show that you put together, a complete bloodthirsty psychopath. Wasn't she like dissolving people's bodies in baths and chopping them up and stuff like this?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Like, she was not a nice person, you know. But
is it quite warm there?
Yeah, it's hot, dude. You can't see him sweating?
I cannot. No.
Okay.
But
but
the tell is that you just stuck a bottle on your neck. So So now I know.
So Griselda, from a young age, she has experts in the game teaching her sons about distribution, selling, killing. These kids are experts, and they're connected direct to Colombia. They get introduced, Rayful and Chicky, and they click right away. They start working together, and it's fairly simple in scope, right? Chicky gets kilos from his family and people in Colombia, and they're going to get that coke delivered to the people Rayful connects them with in D.C., the street kingpins. Rayful is essentially like a power broker himself now. The D.C. dealers would pick up the drugs in Miami and New York, and the Colombians would send their people to D.C. to pick up the money. Rayful's getting 20, 30, 40 kilos shipped to his friends in D.C., and he later estimates he connected Chicky with 20 to 25 dealers there. Chicky's actually paroled a year later after he had met Rayful, and he returns to his horse farm in Colombia to run things from there. So Rayful becomes like the conference call king of prison. He'd make a collect call to a friend in D.C. who would then conference in a Colombian number, i.e. his cartel contact in Colombia. The guy's on the phone for hours every day from prison. He's talking in code. He's making like 60 calls in a 5-hour period because, of course, you got to go back and forth a lot when doing these sorts of deals.
Yeah, should have been a reporter, or maybe not, because he would have had to take about 1,000,000% pay cut.
Yeah, a lot less money, I think, but probably stayed out of jail more. So the Bureau of Prisons and the prison authorities, they don't seem too bothered by it. He's already in prison, so what do they care? He's making only like 5K, 10K per deal, but he's helping move more kilos than he ever did on the street. I mean, there's problems, of course. Some of Rayful's guys, they're not making good on their consignments. Chicky's getting pissed. At one point, he's going to kill 2 of the DC dealers for failing to pay, but Rayful persuades him just to raise his prices, which makes me think he either must have really liked Rayful or he was like the most persuasive, charming guy of all time.
Yeah.
Only a few months later, Chicky's gunned down in a club in Colombia. One source said it had to do with the money issue stemming from the DC payments not being made, but I think the consensus is it had to do with his mom's sort of beefs with pretty much everyone. With Chicky gone, other people in Colombia want to get the money from Ray that Chicky was owed from Ray's people in the street, and they are not feeling as lenient, which might explain why shortly after, Rayful becomes a government informant. See, in August of 1992, a CI informs on Rayful, and the feds start listening in on his calls. Prison authorities might not have cared, and that's going to be a giant scandal when it gets out, but the feds certainly do. Sometime in 1994, the feds approach Rayful with all of this evidence, and he agrees to switch sides and act as an informant. Starting in 1995, he starts reaching out to his dealers again to let them know he's back in business. Remember, Chicky had died, and he was his major connection, so Rayful lies and says Chicky's brother Dixon, who had also been locked up with them, had taken his place. And immediately, 5 dealers take the bait, and Rayful goes to work.
So what's the leverage here? Because he's already inside on 4 life counts. I mean, what are they offering him? Or just something to do, something to pass the time while he's behind bars?
Well, he wanted to get a big reduction, in his time, which probably maybe, get life without parole, move to like 20 years to parole. But his main focus was getting his mom out of prison.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
Which he was very, very intent on. And I think also he was probably fearful for his life if that stuff about like, Chicky's guys wanting to go after people for not paying their money off. Over the next few years, he's going to help get 100 drug dealers convicted and solve 2 killings in the prison, as well as 20 cold case homicides in DC. He becomes one of the most prolific snitches of all time. There are some sources online, I think on like DJ Vlad episodes, claiming he ratted on 300 people. He secretly pleads guilty in 1996 to brokering those deals between the DC dealers and the Colombian cartels, the original ones. Also, as part of his deal for informing, like I said, he gets his mom out of prison. That actually works. Here's that blog, Ghosts of DC, quote, "Throughout the late 1990s and into the 2000s, Edmond aided authorities in unraveling cold case homicides, providing intelligence that led to dozens of drug trafficking arrests, and offering insights into operations of Colombian cartels. He also contributed information to Department of Justice investigations that ultimately prompted major reform of the prison telephone system to crack down on inmates' external criminal activities." And once he's done informing, he hits the interview circuit, right? And his story of not only being the crack kingpin of DC, but also the corruption of completely lackadaisical enforcement in America's prisons that allows his second career, it shocks the country. Dan Rather calls him the Al Capone of cocaine. Eric Holder, the U.S. attorney at the time, calls him the Babe Ruth of crack. And these guys would have been like a great brain trust for podcast episode titles, for real.
Yeah, the Neil Armstrong of meth. the Eddie Vedder of Vicodin. I don't know why. Why am I keep thinking of Eddie Vedder? Eddie Vedder is on my mind, and I have no idea why. I don't even like Pearl Jam.
God, I got nothing for you, man. He does a charming interview with Diane Sawyer on 60 Minutes, actually, where he explains the ins and outs of both sides of his career. Of course, he gets, pretty serious death threats for all the snitching and a bounty on his head before he disappears into prison with Sec. His name pops up again around 2019 when he's being considered for a reduced sentence due to all his cooperation. And there's a couple of articles about his legacy and all that. One funny one in the Washington Post where they talked about how the streets used to be bloody as hell when Edmond operated there, and now they're gentrified as hell. And here's the part I like, quote, "I've heard there were dead bodies literally on the street," he said as he walked his golden doodle, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Which is, that's just good. That's just good stuff right there. But yeah, he actually died just this past December 2024 at a halfway house in Miami of heart disease, which, Sean, it'll get you, man.
Yeah.
And here's a quote I like that I just can't remember where I got it from. It was in my notes somewhere. I forgot to jot down where, so apologies on that. But Edmond is to Washington what John Gotti was to New York, an almost mythical figure whose fearless, flashy lifestyle fascinated even those who condemned him and the way he amassed his fortune.
Just claim the quote yourself, man. We're already way more reliable than any other podcast. We can just live a little.
That's true. Patreon.com/NWorld Podcast for bonus episodes, guys. Thank you for tuning in.